we have a much more complex, or I should say the neuroscientists have a much more complex understanding of it now. Well, and think about doing couples therapy. No
Oh my,
couple remembers any fight in the same way, and they're both
ever.
adamant, no, this is what happened, you know?
That's such a frightening example when you say it.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
so
truly.
half of my time is spent saying, I don't really care what the truth is. what what are you both feeling and what can we do about that?
89% of all new jobs created in the United States of America are created by small businesses. But we are obsessed by the 4 to 5 gigantic companies that we talk about all the time. Clay Crosby, for nearly 20 years, has been offering counseling and therapy services to make our communities, our relationships, and us healthier. At the same time, he's a bona fide small business entrepreneur under his umbrella, building others into the same business. Clay, welcome to SmarterUmedia.
Thank you. Great to be here, Steve.
Well, I am going to talk about many things. You and I have known each other for a long time, and
This
I'm
is
still
true.
working on my own mental health. I'm going to be doing that for a long, long time. But I'm going to get you straight to CT, the chicken timer, so that
Okay.
you can make me and all of us a little bit smarter today before we dig further and deeper. So make
Mhm.
me smart.
Okay. I wrote down a very depressing sort of phrase, but there's a reason for it. And it basically is you will never get to the place you think you need to get to where everything is in place. And if you think you're there, it probably won't last very long. And this is an important mindset for me because, it's kind of like the Dickens thing. There's the best of times, the worst of times is an eternal truth in a way, And so many of us are fixated on, things will be better when I just get, my bank account to this amount, or when I just get this in place, or when that, and we miss out on life. And what happens really is you have to figure out a way to enjoy what's in the present and to expect surprises, expect obstacles, expect things not to go the way you're planning. Otherwise, you're always in the waiting, striving, not really living mode, There's a field of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, which I've been delving into more recently. I think it's very practical, very useful. And one exercise that they use a lot is something called dropping anchor, which is basically if you're in one of those days where it feels like everything's going wrong, you're overwhelmed by the number of problems you have or the things you're worried about. Imagine that's the storm around you. You're a little boat. You can't control the storm. You can't make the storm go away, but you can drop your anchor and wait it out, And while you're doing that as a person, you can breathe. You can take a few deep breaths. You can feel your feet on the ground. You can move your body a little so that you're coming back into the present moment. Oh, that's my 2 minutes already. And
Oh man, the anchor just dropped. Oh, I hate it when that happens. I hate it when that. No, go ahead. Please finish your thought. Go ahead.
yeah, so you remind yourself that even within the storm, you're still you, you're still okay. You still have all the strengths and tools that you've gained over the years, and you're going to get through it. And then tomorrow will be different, because none of these things that we suffer from, well, I should qualify that. Most of the things that we suffer from are not permanent. Things come and go. Strong emotions come and go. Crises come and go. But when we're in the middle of them, sometimes we have trouble remembering that it's not permanent, you know?
And I feel like I get to take a breath I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're here. And
Oh, thanks.
it is lovely to start in what I would sum up as a philosophy major guy. Just about every place across the globe and time have come up with some version of what you just said. And we hear it becomes somewhat cliche, but it matters so much. It's the
Hmm.
journey, right? It's not the
Yeah.
destination. It's being in the moment and all of those things that somehow it sounds so easy to say and
Hmm.
so hard to execute.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, often we put our lives on hold until we get to a certain place. Like one example I often use because I work with a lot of creative people is like the writer who's waiting to start their novel or their screenplay until they can afford to get that really nice new laptop that they need to write it, you know? Like you can't write on your current old computer or a piece of paper, you know?
That is an incredible example because how many of those do we have that we put in our way as
Yeah,
opposed to taking a step, picking a
right.
path, starting to
Exactly.
walk? I mean,
Just getting
all of those
started.
things.
Yeah.
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 Which I think is a great indication of what you offer. And, this is an entrepreneurship based show. So
Hmm.
I am always honestly more fascinated by niches similar to the kind that you inhabit within the entrepreneurial space because it's real people taking the talents that they have and the things that they've learned to do and executing them in a business place. So I'm going to start there, even though that's not probably what you normally think of, but you have to balance that. So it's a business. How's that journey been?
Well, I just have to say it's really funny to me, and it's sort of intimidating to me to think, oh, I'm going to talk about entrepreneurship because, as you know, my dad was a very successful entrepreneur in business, and in many ways, I defined myself in sort of contrast to that. I never wanted to go anything that was business, and didn't think of myself as a business person, you know. And so, but it's true. Everything I've gone into has been I've been a sole proprietor. I've had to build from scratch. And at the moment, I'm building a private practice therapy business for the third time in the last 20 something years because I had, originally went back to grad school and started here in California, did that for a number of years, and then moved to Germany for a few years and started to practice there, and then have been back for a little over a year. So starting the third time, and in a very different environment this time. So I'm having at this semi-advanced age to learn a lot of new things, which is challenging and interesting, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, I
Mhm.
think that's the story of this country. It's the story of history. It's the story of the globe. It's what we've always done. If you want to create something or if you want to do something. You don't have to say create something. If you want to do something, almost always you have to find structure. You have to
Mhm.
find a way to do that thing. And it always takes what I think is entrepreneurial energy. So
Mhm.
here at
For
Smarter You
sure.
Media, our
Mhm.
ultimate conceit is that everyone is an entrepreneur deep down, whether they ever start a business or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're one of those people who truly is for the third time. We'll call you now a serial entrepreneur. You go and you have to find the way, figure out how to do it. So if I'm someone who either already has this as my goal or my career and I want to build something, help me out. How do I start? What do I do? Where do I go? And how do I do it?
Well, it depends a lot on where you are. I happen to be in one of the most saturated markets, and it's confusing because you throw a rock in LA, you're going to hit a therapist. It seems like there's so many of us, and yet you hear people all the time saying, I can't find a therapist. And so it's an interesting market. And right now, there's the market is being changed by much bigger businesses. For the first time since I've been in here, venture capital is suddenly very interested in therapy, and these huge companies are trying to take over the space in different ways. And we have AI coming in and people using AI for therapy, basically. So we're having to figure out a lot. We're sort of, running to keep up and figure out what the story is going to be in the next few years. Um, some of these bigger companies are, the danger is that therapy is becoming more like a gig economy. And people who are new to the field, who are just out of grad school, can sort of build up a practice more quickly and easily, but they're going to be paid very little and have to work really long hours. And the last thing you want is a burned out therapist. It's not very
Yeah.
helpful. So
Yeah.
something has to adjust somewhere along the way, because right now, the positive thing is, more people could have affordable access to therapy, which is really important because the system has been kind of broken for a long time. But I don't think we've found the best way to make that happen yet. And some things that are happening now are really problematic.
Want to stay with you for a second because I want to
Okay.
stay with the roll up my sleeves. Let's say I'm certified in some
Mm.
modality of
Yeah.
counseling or
Mhm.
therapy, and that comes at all
Yeah.
different levels. So won't even try
Yeah.
to break down what that is. But
Yeah.
I think I'm ready to offer myself to create a practice. What's the first sort of steps I would take today? Because you've learned doing this two other times, you're doing it a third time now. What's the stuff? Where do I start and what do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I can just walk you quickly through what I've done in these three different times and how it's had to adjust. So the first time I went back to grad school after it was my second career, I went back to grad school. I got an internship in a private practice and also an internship in a nonprofit agency. So I was doing two different kinds of work at the same time. Um, and I did a number of jobs for nonprofit groups while I was training or shortly after I graduated. And then eventually, I always had a small private practice, but then I worked as an administrator, a supervisor, a trainer at a larger nonprofit for a number of years. So I was about two-thirds nonprofit work and one-third private practice. And then around 2016, 2017, I don't remember, I decided I wanted to phase out of that. So I found a coach, who that's her business is coaching people in private practice therapy businesses. And she really helped me create a business plan to move towards a full-time private practice. And that was going great. And I had a waiting list and was turning people away every month. And we decided to move to Germany.
Well, now okay, let's go full disclosure because
Yeah,
Ellen, your wife, is a good
my wife
friend, and
got a
that's how
great job offer.
we know each other. She got this killer job in Germany, which I'm sure
Yeah,
was a great experience, but
it
that's
was.
an extraordinary thing to make the life choice together of, okay, we're going to pick up and go. And I find that to be really extraordinary from your point of view. It makes me want to choose you as my therapist.
I mean, we had both been ready for that kind of adventure, and it was a great timing in a lot of ways. So, but I didn't know what my professional life was going to like over there, and it was challenging to get a license. But once I did, clients were easy to get because we were in Frankfurt, Germany, which has a very high international population, and there was a huge need for English speaking therapists. So all I had to do to build a business there really was introduce myself to all the English speaking therapists who were there. And they were like, we need you. We can send people your way. To back up a little, the way I built my private practice, or the first time in LA, was mostly through referrals from other therapists who knew my work. And since I had been in this role at a big nonprofit where I got to meet a lot of therapists, I supervised with them, I trained some of them and, taught them classes and supervised them. And then they went on to their own practices. So people knew me and knew how I worked and were comfortable referring clients to me.
Which I'm going to just put a pin in because I think it's one of those things that it sounds like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But if you don't think of it, or if it
Mhm.
just doesn't come around in the ether of your brain, You
Hmm.
might not. It's sort of a
Yeah.
great thing to put yourself in places where there are people who can refer you, and
Hmm.
that's in any business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't just sort of sit in your own isolated world wondering why people aren't calling. You have to be I mean, doing things in nonprofit world, that's great. Doing with things with organizations that surround the ecosystem of your business space.
And also keep in touch with the people you went to grad school with. Keep in touch with the people at the internships you had to do. You know what many people don't realize, people complain about how much therapists charge, private paid therapists. But in order to become, like, I'm a marriage family therapist, which is one particular license. We have to do a master's degree. We have to do In California, you have to do 3,000 hours of supervised counseling work as your internship, which takes quite a long time because a lot of those positions are either unpaid or very low paid. You know, Many people have to have a full-time job while they're doing that, or a half-time job with it or whatever. So it takes several years generally. Then we have to study and pass two like major state exams. So it's a long, expensive process before you can ever hang up that shingle, you know?
And that's different in different states, right? So, I
Yeah,
mean, and
but
it might not
similar.
be that
Yeah.
as cumbersome. And
Mhm.
there are things that you may love or not love in terms of people who are essentially doing counseling and therapy and calling themselves coaches or something
Mhm.
else. Assuming that we're thinking of this in the model of entrepreneurship business, everything has layers and levels of things that you're going to want to do in order to get yourself educated, in order to get yourself ready to do it. And once you get there, the nuts and bolts of doing things like getting to people who are around that world and honestly just telling everybody what it is you're doing. That's
Yeah,
a thing.
identifying the people in your life who are connectors, the people that
Yeah.
are going to talk, will talk you up and stuff. And it's interesting. Like for me, as I say, my primary referral sources have always been other therapists who know my work. You have to be to get yourself known as for doing good work, which is a tricky thing to say. How do I do that? And that takes time.
Can you give me more details?
But, um, well, being networking in the sense of we do what we call peer supervision, which is like after you're licensed you still find some colleagues to meet with and discuss your work to get feedback, etc. That's a good way of doing it, so because then people really understand how you work. Also giving talks at places, find community groups or companies. Like I used to do sort of mindfulness stress relief talks for companies. That's a good way for people to experience what you might be like as a therapist.
Yeah.
The way you present yourself, the way you talk to them will give them an idea of what it might be like to sit with you in a room and share their most intimate issues, So,
I love that. Make yourself available. I mean,
yeah,
that's a thing. Be
yeah.
out there and make yourself available. Okay.
A lot of people are writing, articles or writing blogs. That's another way to do it. Yeah, yeah.
In the
And of course, now
blogosphere
social media. Yeah.
and in the social media, which
Yeah.
is really interesting to me to explore a little bit how that in new universe intersects with what you and I have always thought of as being canons of ethics and things of that sort that are just changing maybe rapidly, but
Yeah.
still matter to us.
Yeah.
How do you handle that balance?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I just did a whole bit of research because since I was licensed, most of the each different kind of psychological license, et cetera, have professional organizations that have codes of ethics, et cetera. And most of them have changed around issues like soliciting testimonials or getting online reviews. That used to be absolutely taboo
No,
in our
no, no, no,
business.
no. So terrible.
Uh,
Anyone that did that was some sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
charlatan or
And
something.
it's just such a reality of business now that now they've created sort of guidelines for how it can be considered ethical, what the ways you can do it that shouldn't be harmful to clients, et cetera. But it's very tricky, because you don't want to sort of exploit a power balance between a therapist and a client, or pressure a client. Yeah.
And it's so personal that when you mentioned that people are doing AI therapy, in my mind, my experience is so personal. That
Hmm.
relationship is so personal, works and doesn't
Yeah.
work. And,
Yeah.
it, I can understand why someone who has the predilections that AI has now would think,
Hmm.
oh, this is great, but
Hmm.
probably would not do much to advance their anything that they really need or want.
The surprising thing is AI comes up with some really good things sometimes.
No, it
And
doesn't surprise me at all. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
saying that it's not whole. Will it guide you? And I don't know. Well, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, I've had people come in with, I asked AI about this dilemma and look at what it came up with. It really helped me. And the truth is, I'm never going to be available at 3 a.m. When somebody wakes up in the middle of the night and is really distressed, AI is always going to be there for them. So I think that's a reality that we have to learn to work with and appreciate the good parts and figure out, you know, what the dangers are.
Yeah, how that
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
How do you balance things like the again, I think of you as a counselor and therapist, and that's where your mind is first, and that's who you are, right? And that's the service that you're offering to someone. Back to the I'm an entrepreneur and this is a business,
Hmm.
making sure that those two things that you serve are in sync and okay when it comes to you and the client is an interesting equation. How do you balance the fact that it would be really helpful to me if that person came back 10 times, but probably time number four, they are ready to take a little time on do their own thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's a tricky question. How do you do it? Because it's something that you learn
I'm a
in your
trickster.
supervision, et
That's
cetera.
it. I'm a trickster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you have to continually be evaluating that. What are my motivations in this moment? What's best for the client? And try to separate out the two. One thing that's really helpful, many therapists, and I put myself in this group, are that's a real challenge because it's hard to talk about money. It's hard to ask for what we feel like we deserve, especially when you've got someone who's struggling and it may be hard for them to come up with the money or whatever the issue is. So the more we can just be really clear about our boundaries. Like for instance, just as an example, most therapists have a cancellation policy where if you cancel in less than 24 hours or less than 48 hours before the appointment, whatever it is, they're going to charge you. If you're really clear about that up front and make sure that the client understands that, it's going to be a lot easier than if you're kind of wishy-washy about it and then you go ahead and charge the client. That creates all kinds of issues. So we just have to really work with our colleagues, our mentors, to establish what our boundaries should be, what we feel comfortable with, make sure we have a rate that will actually support us, and then be clear and clean about communicating it. You know, does
And
that does that
you
kind of answer your question? Is that sort
Well,
of?
I think it completely does. It's the challenge of communication, which is your métier. It's what you do. It is, yet some of us are great as personal communicators and might go into something like counseling because of that. And yet in the work environment, we find ourselves unable to do that in the same way.
Mhm, mhm. I think a lot of counselors are people pleasers and conflict avoidant, just as a lot of people in every field are. So you have to really work on that part of yourself. You know?
But I think it's a great entree into one of those things that anyone who's ever started a business, and a gigantic, something like 75% of the businesses in the United States are family businesses. So there are
Hmm.
more than one person in the family working in the business.
Yeah.
And so communication at home and at the workplace is something so many of us almost have dual different universes and lives. I mean, I'm a
Hmm.
great communicator in business. Sometimes I stink at home, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that could be reversed. But when family's involved, even in the business, it's one of those things that you always have to juggle. But I think you are at the crossroads. So literally
Hmm.
you're helping us communicate, usually individually, but probably at work too. You also have to be a communicator at work. Give me the secret. How do I do it better? Come
Wait,
on.
what's the
Come
question here?
on. We're here. We got an hour. We got an hour. Clay, you're going to fix me. This is it. You're going to fix me right now. Thank the good Lord. Everybody's going to be so happy.
The solution is to have a good therapist you can run it by, and go,
Now
or
back to that.
somebody,
Is that the
somebody.
business side speaking or?
No, no, no. Um, and I'm also a huge believer in writing things down. If you have a difficult conversation coming up that you're stressed about, write down what you want to say, write down the most important points and edit it, so that you're taking out the messy, emotional, personal stuff and communicating what's most important to communicate. And it does often help. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but to have some confidant that you can run that by.
I want to say AI may have something of to help us with on this front, but here is my
For sure.
personal experience with contemporary large language models.
Hmm.
And that is my problem, not the model, which is I go and I have something like a difficult conversation.
Hmm.
And if I write them down myself, if I write the things that I need to think of down, and then I put that into something like an AI model, that's a different experience for me than starting too early, because the AI is very good at articulating the
Hmm.
thing so that pretty soon I'm not even necessarily having the conversation that I really wanted to have.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 The more specificity you put in, the more helpful it'll be. Yeah.
Or just, it has to serve the purpose that you want. And you have to at least be able to know how to articulate that enough, even to have technology or even another person. I've
Hmm.
had those, this is what you do. But
Hmm.
people, when you have a conversation with someone to ask them their opinion, that sometimes they're very strong personalities, and all of a sudden it's what they wanted to do, not what
Sure.
you were
Sure.
trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But I find bullet points really help me. It's like, what are the main points I have to hit? Because I know that when the person's reaction may throw me off course.
You said, I wrote a depressing phrase down,
Mhm, mhm,
which were your notes. These were your
mhm.
bullet points to get us started at SmarterUmedia for this discussion. And that was that you're never going to get to that place where all the things are set up. It's all right.
Yeah, this imagined place that we have, or many of us have. Yeah,
You're not going to get to that place, which I think underscores what I always like to say, which is my goal in life is to sing the song and dance the dance of life every time that I can.
yeah, yeah.
So if that's where I am, how have you found the better ways to spend more of that time in the zone? What are some things that I can do to keep me there more often, longer?
It really depends on your particular the way that you do it. I've done a lot of training in various mindfulness techniques and mindful awareness techniques, and I use a lot of that with my clients, just ways to actually ground yourself and be in the moment. I also close to half of my work is with couples, and so um, the sort of correlation there is how much time are you spending trying to get your partner to be the person that you think they should be rather than who they are, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how do you ground yourself and remember, first of all, what attracted to you to them in the first place and appreciate what they're doing now, you know, for who they are and what they're bringing to the relationship rather than just noticing the things that are not what you expect them to be doing. You know, I think I've
God,
lost track of your question again, but
I think now I'm going to answer your question that you asked me back, which is I think they really need to be what I need them to be, and so
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
working.
that's the
It's pretty
problem.
much 100% of the time. I'm just trying to get them where they ought to be, for God's sake,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
I mean, it's going to be so much easier if they could just be what they're supposed to be.
exactly. Yeah.
I would be a terrible patient, wouldn't I? No, I think I actually find that to be profound. I would like to dig a little deeper into the relationship mode, because relationships take so many different forms. And
Mhm.
I think oftentimes by the time we're in conversation with someone who is a counselor that can really help us, it's almost too late. Maybe not in California where everyone is in therapy, but in lots and lots of places,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we think we can sort it all out. Anything that you have found that helps me figure out when I should get a red flag? When should I be in therapy? Should all of us be in therapy? Or when do I
Um,
sort of make that conversation start with my spouse?
it's so situation dependent, but before it gets to the point where you realize that the resentment is really hardening, if that makes sense. Once you realize that that there's this sort of constant irritation or that resentment is starting, that's the time to get in there.
So you're saying the first day of your relationship.
Well, I have a really good friend who is a big believer in therapy, and basically when her husband proposed to her, she was like, "Well, think about it. After we've been in couples therapy for a while, that was just a requirement before she would even consider it. For some people, that works.
Having a place that's a safe space to really talk
Yeah,
about things that
yeah,
even is a scheduled time. How great would it be if you're just looking at each other going, it's pretty good. I mean, maybe we could do a couple of, what could we do better? Because I feel like that's the ultimate hope, that you're walking through life together to do
yeah.
that.
Most of us choose people who are different from us in some way because that's exciting or interesting, or we admire those parts that are different than us, but then we get under stress in a committed relationship, and that but starts to become friction, the very things that we were attracted to. So it's important to have an outlet to sort of take that apart and look at it and realize that the family I came from had their own unique way of dealing with conflict and expressing emotions, and somebody else's family is going to be different, and that's going to lead us to all kinds of misunderstandings and friction.
I mean, isn't it really just the super collider? That's what all primary relationships are. And we've
Yeah,
got particles that are going all around this thing, and you slam those two universes into each other. That's where we are. So there's
yeah,
going to
yeah,
be fallout, and there's going to be an awful lot of energy released.
yeah, yeah. And when you're in a long-term committed relationship, all of your stuff gets put right in your face.
Yeah.
You have to
Uh,
really look at your habits and, yeah, how
and I
you
do
cope with
think
things.
we touched on a little bit, but communication across different modes and more modalities of our lives. We may have had great modeling for how to communicate in community settings, but really none or not great in individual settings, and particularly in a primary relationship.
Yeah, yeah. And people are from different cultures. People are there's so many factors that you have to sort of sort through.
I'm sure you have people who also come in to figure out how to sort out the lines in the workspace. I
Of
assume
course.
you have found people in the workspace who come and say, look, we just can't, we got to get along. We're
Mhm.
co-founders and we just friggin' can't talk without
Yeah,
yelling at each other.
yeah.
How is that a different part of the practice of counseling people to make their way?
I've only had a few opportunities where it was basically like family therapy with work colleagues. Somebody, I remember one time a long time ago, an owner of a small business came in with two or three of his employees to sort of sort things out. That's fascinating work. There are, of course, therapists that just specialize in that. That's what they do. And I think that would be an interesting field to go into, but it's very similar to family therapy, especially in smaller, businesses.
Yeah. And you oftentimes in work relationships spend more time with those people than you wind up spending at home or in waking hours at home. That's just the way we structure our society, I suppose.
Yeah. In my practice, it's more likely to be an individual trying to figure out how to communicate with their boss or whatever, whoever the person is that they're struggling with at work, and that can take up a lot of therapy.
I can only imagine. So how are you at it? So you now are the boss man, and as you're building your third practice, you have other counselors and therapists
I have
in
two
your orbit.
therapists. Yeah, yeah. And one of the main reasons I did that, to be honest, is a big part of my career has always been supervising beginning therapists. And I get so much out of doing that. I really enjoy it. So, I mean, it's good from a business standpoint because I have, other income coming in besides just my hourly rate that I have to be sitting in the chair for. If I go on vacation, there's still some, money coming in, et cetera. But it's also this aspect of mentoring, of just discussing the work in a way, because my field is very isolating. We're mostly one-on-one or 1 to 2 in an office by ourselves, and most of the stuff that we do during the workday we're not allowed to talk about with our families or friends,
Anything.
because it's all confidential. Yeah, so it can be very isolating. It's really nice to we have a weekly supervision meeting where we sit down and talk about what's going on in the work and things that we can help each other with. And it allows me to share my experience also. But I also learn a lot from them because they're just fresh out of graduate school, and graduate school is different than it was when I was there. They've learned a lot of stuff that I haven't been exposed to, and they have different ideas. And so it's a really rich experience, and makes the I don't know, makes the work week a little more lively, lighter.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
adds to life. And one of the things
yeah,
we talk about, we just have these
yeah,
extraordinary people who have built businesses, who have built within large businesses. And so often a lot of the experience is that interpersonal mentoring, mentee experience where you'd never get from both sides. And when we think about mentors as the focus, I don't. I think it's this beautiful symbiotic
yeah.
thing that if
Mhm.
you are in a latter part of your career and you're
Mhm.
not being a mentor, you're
Yeah,
missing the boat.
for sure. Yeah.
But that's great that that is a big part of what you get out of having the younger folks. Is there any particular thing you said there are things they learned that I didn't learn? Like what? What
Well, it's
comes
interesting
to mind?
because in the last 20, 25 years, our field has become much more technique oriented. There's this, and a lot of this is insurance driven ultimately because um, therapy didn't used to be such a medical model, but now for insurance to pay, you have to prove that there's medical necessity for the therapy. And so they want therapists to be using evidence-based practices that you can say, we've done these, research studies that show that this particular practice is, effective. And the only way to do that is to have therapy models that are very, manualized step by step so that you can actually do an experiment that shows that these therapists were all doing the same thing. So there's a lot of debate in the field about the actual value of that, although some of these new techniques are incredibly valuable. Like I now do EMDR, which is a trauma therapy, which is very research validated and fascinating, the effectiveness that it has. Some of the others I think are just kind of more ways of repackaging what therapists always did, but in a way that you can say it's research validated. But that's my cynical point of view there.
Well,
Um,
it's also the tail does wag the dog
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just particularly in economies because
yes,
the entity that has the economic power can decide how things lay out. And
yes.
that's not always great. Sometimes the externalities are good and you get good stuff, but not all the time.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily recognize the skill of some of the people that have been doing it for a long time that weren't trained in that way.
That gets down to two really fun, wonky things that I want to talk about. And the first one is the brain, because
Hmm.
in the time that you and I have been out of school, forget when
Yeah,
we've been in school, in the time that we've been
neuroscience. Yeah,
out of school, it
yeah.
is entirely different. Still some people are teaching the things that we know are just not the way it works. But what we know about the way that our brains work has
Hmm.
to affect sort of the way we view things like EMDR. I don't
Of
even remember
course.
what does it stand for, EMDR?
I can never say it right. Eye
Good. I
movement
don't good. Thank you. I feel much better.
desensitization and
I don't
reprocessing.
remember
Yeah.
either, but it is
No,
quite
I know what it is. I just always have trouble with desensitization. Anyway.
but it is literally one of those things that is a recognition of things we used to think that was, well, once it's in there, you can't get it out. And that's not what we think now.
Well, and what's fascinating, EMDR is a great example of the advances in neuroscience because, I forget what year it started, but with maybe 30 years ago, it was first, the Francine Shapiro was the woman who invented it. And she had this idea because of an experience she had. She started experimenting. She came up with this protocol that was incredibly effective and then kind of had to figure out the science behind it. And so she and other people came up with a model explaining what they thought was happening with the brain. And people sort of went with that for years, saying, we're not totally sure, but we think this is what is happening. And now all this new information is coming out that's saying, like, well, that's probably not exactly what it is. We think it's more this, but the protocol is still really effective.
It
We're just
works.
still figuring out the mechanism. So it's fascinating.
Including placebo. I mean, the things that we now understand, still, let me say that that's not the right word. We don't understand it. No idea why that works. But the fact that the placebo effect, even with operations, fake operations that they
Yeah, yeah,
do
yeah,
on knees,
yeah.
actually someone recovers at the same level as the people who got the go
Right.
figure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But if it
yeah,
works,
yeah,
if it works,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Did you ever read Lisa Barrett's book, The 7.5 Lessons About the Brain?
No.
Oh, my brother. I'm going to have a conversation with you after you read her book. And anyone who
Okay.
hasn't should. It's a great, very, very short, not overly complex recitation
Uh-huh.
of sort of where neuroscience is today and how different it is from what Aristotle perceived it to be, which
Yeah,
apparently
yeah.
we still cling on to the reptilian brain that doesn't exist.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
You don't have a reptile brain, whoever you are. There's no
Right,
reptile
right.
in there. It's just you trying to
Yeah,
figure your stuff out.
yeah. And the old idea about the left and right brain it's all becoming, we have a much more complex, or I should say the neuroscientists have a much more complex understanding of it now,
Yeah, I mean, you're
essentially. Yeah,
128 billion neurons that
yeah,
work
yeah.
as this network. We don't have memories that are files in our brain. I mean, these are things that you grow up thinking, oh, so I have that memory and it's there. And that's
Mhm, mhm.
just not the way it works. No wonder law cases, are mystified that people remember things differently. We're literally
Right.
assembling it in the moment.
Well, and think about doing couples therapy. No
Oh my
couple remembers any fight in the same way, and they're
God.
both adamant, no, this is what happened,
That's such a frightening example when you say it.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
so
truly.
half of my time is spent saying, I don't really care what the truth is. what what are you both feeling and what can we do about that? It's like,
that's a profound moment. I just want to stop for
Yeah.
a minute. I want to
Yeah.
stop because I think, wow, that exists. It doesn't matter where you are. The old movie, the Japanese movie Rashomon, where
Hmm.
5 people
Hmm.
witness something, and of course they all
Yeah.
witness a different thing,
Yeah.
is what we exist in every day. But if we can somehow disabuse ourselves of this notion that what I thought was
I'm right
right,
and you're wrong.
that gives us a chance
Yeah. Yeah.
in anywhere, and no matter where you are, that's a really lovely gift that you can give, not just to them, but you gave to us today. So
Mm. But
thank you
for
for that.
many of us, it's really hard to let go of that. I
And the
know I'm right.
oh well, I'm
I
not
know
saying
what I heard. I know what I saw.
I'm not saying you're not right, but sometimes you just got to let them have a little, yeah, okay, all right, sure, that's what happened. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the other thing is very macroscopic in its sort of economic way. You started talking a little bit about what's happening in what we would call in sort of the business ecosphere of people rolling up is
Mhm.
the term of art that you
Yeah.
use, taking something that is money. It's a pot of money. There are a lot
Hmm.
of people who are paying for counseling and therapy. That
Hmm.
means there's a pot of money. And then
Hmm.
if someone can take that and roll it up into a larger thing, we can take that company public, we can bring in VCs, and we can make it into some giant enterprise. That just happens, right? The markets do that sort of stuff. I You're noticing and feeling it. Describe more how you're noticing and feeling what's happening in the marketplace.
Well, it's always been, at least in my market here in LA, it's always been that, there are a certain number of people that want to stay in sort of the nonprofit world or, really, and there's other people that want to go into private practice. If you're going into private practice, in order to make a good living, most people I know, their goal is to get away from insurance because the insurance is 50% or less of what you can charge as a private therapist and twice as much time spent on administrative work. It really just
A good equation.
doesn't work out well. And so now what's happening is there are these big companies coming in saying, sign up with us. We'll handle all the administration. We'll get you signed up on the insurance companies, and you just have to do your work. And so that is great for someone who's new and doesn't know how to start a practice and doesn't have a referral source. You can get started, but then you're locked into these fees where you're going to have to probably see, you know, over 35 clients a week. And really, people say, well, 40 hours a week is a normal work, week. Why don't you see 40 hours a week? But there's a lot of additional work you have to do. And just the emotional nature of the work, you need to be able to have some self-care and time. So that's you, like I said before, you end up with burnout therapists. What's happening now that I'm hearing more of is clients get frustrated because their therapists leave those situations, so there's turnover, they're saying, and now it's come out that several of these big companies are actually backed by insurance companies, so you have to wonder where it's all headed and where it's going, but the bottom line is that you can have a private practice in name that where you're working with one of these companies and you're really not in control of your business. You're at their mercy. You're signing all kinds of contracts where they are in control and they control all the fees, et cetera. So it's a very new landscape. Um, and then the AI thing comes in. I'm using AI in my practice.
You should. I mean, if we're not
My
using AI, we're missing it, right? I mean, you should,
Yeah,
I think.
but do I fully understand it all? It's like it's a little bit of a new frontier. It's like, I work with a company that I did multiple webinars to learn how they're rolling out their AI and what their safety precautions are, et cetera. I felt pretty safe with it. The thing that I'm using it for is my progress notes, my therapy notes. So AI actually records the session, makes the note, and then deletes the recording. I have clients that are not interested in doing that, and that's fine. They sign off whether they want to do it or not. But it's a huge change for me because the documentation has always been, I'm a little bit ADD, and I'm always behind on that. It's always a burden. It's just a pain, and it's for the we have to do a lot of documentation that feels like busy work because most of it is not going to be used in certain specific instances that might be necessary. So we have to have it. But, and I'm not good at that kind of stuff. I
Well, it
resist that kind of
also
stuff. Yeah.
it it
Yeah.
should make us better. And
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a group I work with in Tennessee on the podcast. And when we spoke at first, and they said almost apologetically, sometimes we use AI, and I said, I hope so. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
working with a partner or someone in business who is not, then you are missing out while you have to put it in the appropriate place, use it in a responsible way, all of those things we know. I think I would want my therapist to be availing him or herself of whatever the best tools are that we can use to work.
And yet there's a certain amount of trust because we all know that these companies are getting huge, and I don't know if you've seen this new movie, the AI doc that's out, where they interview about the heads of several of these companies, and it's like they don't know where it's going. So it's all it's a leap of faith for sure, you know.
Yes, that's a perfect place for us to go to our final question.
Okay.
and, and with that, the therapist says it's a leap of faith. So you, me, Clay, and Kierkegaard, we're all going to do it. It's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we always end our sessions by thinking about information. We're already
Mhm.
a little bit on the technology track, but it's that time. We have good information, bad information all around us. And man, we
Yeah.
want the good stuff.
Yeah.
So if there's something in your practice or in your life that you can give to me as something you trust and you find to be trustworthy, that's a great
Yeah.
help.
I thought of a couple of things. For me personally, doing some form of mindfulness meditation has been one of the most helpful things in my life. But I am not a routine kind of person. I've never been one of those people who says, I'm getting up at 5 and going to the gym before work and I'm going to do it every day. It's just not the way I'm wired. I've found that now we have in our phones and our earpods all these wonderful resources, and there's several really good ones for meditation where you can do it at your own pace for the length of time that you want, find a voice that you like, etc. So there's the Insight Timer, there's Headspace, there's Calm. These are great resources, and I share them with my clients a lot. And also, if you can't sleep, they have resources for that. I think everybody who is curious about that stuff should be checking into that. Also, the one that I've been referring people to a lot lately is if you've had a big loss, if you're having experiences of grief and loss in your life, this podcast that Anderson Cooper has been doing the last few years
Don't know
is
it at all.
an unbelievable resource. He has so many great conversations with all kinds of people about how they have dealt with grief and loss in their life. And it's really inspiring and moving and just perfect because everybody deals with grief differently. There's not a set protocol. And to hear these different responses and experiences can be really I don't know, I find it very life affirming.
And do you know that is it just called Grief or Anderson
Uh,
Cooper? Do you know the
if
name
you
of it?
just search Anderson Cooper podcast, it comes up. I can't
All right.
remember the name right now. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's totally that's
yeah,
totally great. I would
yeah.
add on the sort of mindfulness thing, I have found for my own personal experience that stuff to be incredibly day changing though
Hmm.
I don't always stick to it. And I find that I'm not great. I'm not going to meditate for an hour, but I can meditate for
Hmm.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
And there are, free places out there that you can get charged for it too. But my two favorites are Boho Beautiful, and
Okay.
Meditation Mountain, both of which you
Okay.
can find on Spotify and I'm sure on any of the social media platforms. But that is an amazing difference to the day. If I can get myself just to take 10 minutes for some reason, that's hard some days, but shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah.
Um,
But in our world, we need ways to slow down, you know?
yeah. Yeah. Amen. Um, Clay, it is great to see you, and I am
Likewise.
going to see you in person before I am going to see you virtually again, I'm sure.
Good. Yeah, it's great to see you, Steve.
Thanks for
Thanks.
coming to Smarter You and being a part of this. Everybody, remember, stay curious, stay open. Your life will be better and more positive for it. We'll see you soon, Clay.